I am Dracula. Listen only to my voice. Lima, Lima, Charlie, 001. Automated voice recognition systems developed by Hutchins Security and Surveillance. 2018 AD. We're still traveling through distance, space, and time outside the Milky Way galaxy and inside the Milky Way galaxy. This is very important. Time for a commercial right here on HEMP Radio TV. Have you or someone you know or love been a victim of Christian ritual abuse? Tell Dracula myself about your experience, your ordeal, right here on Vlad Dracula. My email address, all lowercase letters, HRH Vlad Dracula, one word, at gmail.com. Again, all lowercase letters. Email, electronic mail, for those of you that are observing the 1964 Bell telephone exhibit there at the New York World's Fair. And thank you, Sovereign State of New York, for all of the input, the ingenuity. I'd like to thank my friends at Bell Telephone, and also all of the intelligence gathered and all of the efforts for NASA from Seattle World's Fair 1962, which is official by the World's Fair exhibition people. And, of course, Operation Elvis, where would we be without the Colonel? And Operation Elvis people inside the active Pentagon before, during, and after 11 September 2001, A Space Odyssey, as produced and shown and revealed in the film 2001, A Space Odyssey, HAL, One Step Up, IBM. IBM 2. How are you? HAL 9000? You're actually, in reality, the prototype of International Business Machines 1.0. Of course, IBM International Business Machines are not to be confused with Bill Gates, the CEO of Microsoft. And many of the technological developments that have come through Windows digital operating system have given us the ability and the facility to use the technology readily accessible and available. The fact that perhaps Bill Gates and myself do not see eye to eye, I will have to give credit where credit is due to President Donald John Trump I, inaugurated President of the United States of America, 20 January 2017, in spite of all of the voices to the contrary. They treated the campaign of President Trump as a joke, but I can assure you when it comes to business, and may I dare say pleasure, President Trump is the man. Thumbs up to President Donald John Trump I. Can't wait to see what the future looks like under an administration of President Donald John Trump II. But that's just projections into the future as of 2018 AD. And again, if you, a member of your family, or some of your friends have been a victim of Christian ritual abuse, tell Dracula about it. I'm very interested in these kinds of horror stories. And if within the realm or even the remotest realm of my probability, I'll call upon all of my satanic lesbian caverns to do what we can to stand together as a united satanic world and accomplish something in this generation to put an end to Christian ritual abuse. I emphasize again, Christian ritual abuse. Now, what legally defines Christian ritual abuse? And let me expand the definition of that phrase somewhat. It would be in violation against your will or being held against your will, being forced to comply to, shall I dare say it, Christian religious bullshit that you don't believe, don't ever intend to believe. And at some point, especially when you're 21 years of age, you can simply wave and say, hello, Muzi. Hello, Vlad Dracula. A thumbs up to Muzi. She's been a subscriber of mine for a long time. I'm coming up gradually to the 21st century. And of course, all of you in drama throughout the country. And let me just cut to the reality that the reason, I should say the primary objective behind my YouTube account, and you can see easily that it's validated, verified, all of the data, the information that's necessary for my identity, and to say, because I had to go this direction, because believe it or not, there are still forces that are still trying to say, you know, you've got little girls that are subscribing to your YouTube account, and we're going to try to shut it down, have it pulled. And I'm like, what violations or crimes am I guilty of? And they're saying, teaching my children about Satanism. Are you crazy? Well, again, this is our case. If you're forcing them to comply and to learn about your version or your brand of Christianity, whatever that may be, time will tell. When they're 21, if they go on to bigger and better things, such as theological expository school and become great minds and theologians, or as I aspire to see the future generations become the next generation of NASA rocket scientists. I'm online with Muzi and looks like Lyron. Hello, Vlad. How are you doing? I'm doing great. Kettle on Water, thumbs up, another longtime subscriber. Hi, Vlad. How is Lieutenant Schultz doing? Yes, indeed. The good old days of Coalinga, West Hills Community College. And for those of you that saw Mr. Bob Crane that played Colonel Hogan on Hogan's Heroes, when the elevator got stuck, that was a classic. And of course, one of the things that Mr. Crane asked, because for some reason, is like when Farrah Fawcett came up and wanted to touch my head, and she sat there and she was crying, because it's like, why are all these Hollywood stars coming to see me? But it only takes one contact. But see, Mr. Bob Crane was simply asking because he was under the mistaken belief at that time that I was inside the loop and had intelligence, that at that time, at that place and age, I was only, 12, 13 when Bob Crane came to Coalinga West Hills Community College and showed the blooper films of Hogan's Heroes. You guys remember that? But before he left town, he simply said, I'm going to have some friends come up and see you. And, you know, he marked it out that one of my favorite shows was Happy Days. I made contact with Erwin Moran before she died. And of course, she did what a lot of individuals do. And if you choose to make this transition, say, I once was a practicing Satanist, but I've seen the light and I've converted to Christianity. The part that I don't really understand is why, when they make that, it's kind of like when they go to the penitentiary and they suddenly or abruptly converted to Christianity inside the penitentiary, which they're inclined to do. It's like, I'll do whatever it takes to get out of here. And they have a chaplains program that comes in and outside the penitentiaries. And, you know, based upon, you know, the particular Christian groups, remember, you know, there's so many things that come to my mind. You don't frequently see a van pull up loaded with satanic lesbians on board saying, are there any inmates that are going to be released back to free society that are lesbians that have petitioned the Lesbian Church of the Devil, Cavern 616. Now, someone was asking me, what is this cavern thing? It's a documented fact that when I was about how time, the older you grow, you want to lock things in, especially for CIA purposes and intelligence purposes, whether they're Canadian or Russian or whatever. Do the satanic lesbians have anything to do with Operation Britney Spears? Everything to do with Operation Britney Spears. What we do, we protect our entertainers. And the fact of the matter is, you've heard the old adage that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. And if you watch Operation Elvis in the movie Follow That Dream, that's exactly what is communicated in the courtroom. Even though it's a Hollywood movie, the old man played by Arthur O'Connell stands up and says, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. And the judge says, excuse me, this may or may not be relevant to the case. But again, remember what Elvis was indicted for initially, for going into the bank, and they mistook him for a bank robber. Now, see, all of these Hollywood films, even 3,000 Miles from Graceland, there was something that was about that film that, if you remember the original Shin Kicker, we all know him as Kurt Russell. And of course, Granny, ow, son of a bitch. Now, see, that's an ongoing gag that I do, because I asked the question to some of my friends that were going to assemble at the grave of the individual whose name escapes me, that was the Bible salesman in Foul Play, Billy Barty. Thank you, Billy Barty. We're going to have to maybe get contact with the Vatican and maybe get the holy water, and, maybe even go through the proper papal channels. And I do want to forewarn everybody that this is what it means to be a diplomat. Sometimes it's like dancing on the head of a pin, because I've already had my Vatican compliance. Believe it or not, I didn't even think it was possible to be banned from the property of the Roman Catholic Church for doing penance as ordered by the proper channels of His Holiness the Pope. Why was I doing penance, you say? Because some of our satanic groups got a mite out of line, and shall we say it led to some vandalism of Roman Catholic properties. And so that's what it means to be a leader. To say, if you think that Satanism is about breaking into the Roman Catholic Church, as in Operation Change of Habit, and stealing the crucifix and doing violence or vandalism to the people while they're having mass. Now, let me go back to Kalinga, because I think it's probably still on record somewhere if they dug deep enough. We used to raise hell on Sunday mornings when the Roman Catholics were gathering at their mass, and that's part of the reason for the penance. Because I look back on some of the things that we did that were kind of borderline, but we were, shall I say, punks, and coming up through the ranks. This is one reason why I will always respect my chief of police, because when you're borderline, the chief especially, she has to think to herself, do I really want to, put this person all the way in the system? Because it's like some of the teachers used to say about me, if you use that brain in a creative way, then Timothy, you might go very far in life. If you spent half of the effort that you do in mischief and mischief making, you might be something someday. And I'm like, what name did you call me? And they would say, Timothy. I'm saying, please address His Royal Highness as Vlad Dracula. Thank you very much. Now, see, that was kind of an ongoing gag. Did you manage to harness the soul out of Elvis's unborn twin brother as a super soldier's army to prevent the 9/11 situation, Vlad? Good question. I like that. I like where you're going with that. Because, again, those of you that have been around me for a while or even acquainted with me on YouTube, and I do want to shout out to Australia. And there's, I want to thank all of the girls that are, just coming on YouTube with your very first, for me, it was the my slideshow. And believe it or not, probably the time it took to do my first slideshow is about 100 years in the life of the real Dracula. By the time we get to this stage where I'm actually streaming live, I'm thinking, if I just had a couple of friends that just graduated from Pangburn or Heber Springs this last year, they could probably do in 5 minutes what it's taken me at the age of 54 to do probably since 2005. So that's 13 years in the making, and we're still going strong. About the harnessing of Elvis's soul, this is why I really love what we do, people, as things that people frequently do is put labels on themselves. And so you really have to contemplate. And, when you're just coming through puberty, and us older and wiser folks, I think, not that we're necessarily obligated. I determined to use YouTube, and especially the YouTube shooting. Condolences to all of those that lost family members and lost their lives doing what I'm doing right now. And that is just trying to have some fun and entertain, but along the way, to provoke your mind and stimulate your imagination. So, really down in the comments down below, you can always spot them, can you not? And I determined that I'm not going to respond to a lot of ignorance or a lot of ignorant people. And how do I judge, their mental acuity, if you will? Well, you can disagree with somebody, but do it in a provocative way that promotes intelligence. Lyron, do you think YouTube is censoring you and not promoting you enough? Really, I'm not really seeking to be promoted by YouTube, because in effect, it's kind of like when I formed my first coven, and that goes back to the idea of the cavern, because I walked barefoot down Carlsbad Caverns, barefoot. And when I got back home and reported to my oversight committee, which were all satanic lesbians, they laughed about it, because they had told me to carry the emergency blanket. And if you don't know what that is, go to Walmart or, many of the camping outlet stores. It's a material that's made from the same type of material that's used for the old NASA astronaut suits. And the whole purpose of it is it will keep your body temperature at body temperature and keep you from freezing. But I literally descended Carlsbad Caverns barefoot, which is why we call our circles, our covens, caverns, and they each have a distinctive cavern number. Cavern number 616, if you are not well acquainted with it, you go back to June 16th, 1964, and voila, marry that to Rosemary's Baby, and for a wonderful Halloween experience, put another feature on there and call it The Satanic Rites of Dracula, which I believe was also a Hollywood film that was produced, and they renamed it, reclassified it as The Brides of Dracula. And so a lot of people say, what's up with this Dracula thing? Well, if Halloween was made for anything, it was made for us to get together, have some fun, do it intelligently without freaking out the community. So the battle, ideologically speaking, is they say, well, why are you always ragging on the Christians? Because isn't it true? Think about this. It's been probably not even 5 years. And when was the last time that you heard the indictments and the charges about satanic ritual abuse? And do you know how many millions of dollars have been expedited through the FBI channels looking and going after, attempting to prosecute those practitioners of satanic ritual abuse? And in every case, what it leads back to is individual persons or more involved persons that demonstrated the crimes for which they were charged by their own actions. And so responsibility is very important. So if you're going to commit activities that eventually get you charged and indicted and into the courtroom, don't just sit up there on the stand and say, it's because I had no choice. The devil made me do it. Because, those of us that have studied, practiced, shall I say, the descending path or the dark arts for a long time are understanding exactly what's happening here. We have certain civil rights in this country that afford us the luxury and opportunity to be ourselves. And if we don't fit into the cookie cutter model of other people's demands and expectations, that's where you got to break out and say, I go back to my training when I was into a lot of mischief in Coalinga, California. My chief of police used to encourage me to use intelligence in this following way. Is that the most intelligent course of action? And I think I've probably told you about coming to junior high school with Black Cat firecrackers that I actually bought while on vacation, summer of 1976, in Pangburn, Arkansas. My first trip to Greer's Ferry Dam to look at where President John F. Kennedy actually stood. So I go back to Coalinga Junior High School, and I'm selling these Black Cat firecrackers, and tell you about the hall monitor catching me. And see, she was the most feared person in the school because, think about this. It's like, if you really wanted to present it the way it was in my recollection, put a Nazi uniform on her back with a with a Nazi flag, and here I am, a practicing Jew. You know what I'm saying? And it's like just the, you know, the conflict with the Nazi feminist persona. Not that a Nazi feminist, you know, they've got civil rights too. They want to go out in the woods and practice their Nazi feminism, as opposed or contrasted with the satanic feminists, or in this case, the satanic lesbians. It's different strokes for different folks. It's like, you know, what is your thing? And for all of the miscreants, the rejects, the outcasts of society, isn't it true that as our circle of opportunity grows here, we can certainly be online as we are now, give our commentary, say how things are going, and you know, inevitably somebody's going to decide for themselves, I'm going to force everybody to comply to my worldview, and therefore I make the case again for what I clearly identified distinctly as Christian ritual abuse. And by the way, did you see the video that I have on my playlist? If you don't, check it out, about the lesbian principal at Betsy Ross Elementary. Now, that is my hero. Why is she my hero? Because she personifies exactly what Chief of Police Jane Castor personifies. We've come a long way down the road, and it hasn't been that many years ago when women couldn't even be in roles of combat. They had to be in the rear, behind the scenes, if you will. And in the case of Chief of Police Kay Holloway, end of watch, 4 January 1980, she mentally became a police officer the day that President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, because there was a lot of questions she had. She went to the police academy, made it clear she didn't want to just be an administrator. She didn't just want to push a pencil. And all of those years of working as a street officer, coming up through the ranks, believe me, by the time she became the chief of police of Coalinga, California, not only did she make history by being the first female chief of police, but she made history. I can remember the premier restaurant, the cafe, one time, and she comes waltzing in there saying, I'm going to make Coalinga $1 million. Well, she wound up in her career in unfortunate early death when their plane crash, her and her husband, California Highway Patrol Don Holloway in the foothills of Coalinga, after coming back from, you know, Sacramento. It stands out in my mind about how she stood and her positions. And, you know, the sad part of it is, to a lot of people would be just like, you know, especially those of you that have an axe to grind with police to begin with, the authorities. And see, I was always brushing up against the law because I was looking for that clear line of demarcation. What separates me as a John Q. public citizen? I'm just out here practicing. You know, it's like, imagine you're in the cemetery on Halloween, and this is generally how this is done. How do I form my own satanic coven? First of all, I strongly recommend in 2018, you go in broad open daylight and meet with the administrators and say, well, you have a problem? My friends and I want to come out here Halloween and form our little satanic coven. And it's like, you know, in the Bible Belt, they immediately go into hyperventilation. You want to do what? It's like, imagine me going through the front door of the Cleburne County Sheriff's Department and announcing I'm here for Team Obama, working undercover for the U.S. Secret Service for, you know, undercover operations for Satanism. And it's like, as Mindy McCready and I went out to Walnut Grove Cemetery, which is, I mean, you can't get any more in the backwoods than Walnut Grove Cemetery, but fortunately or unfortunately, there's a Baptist church adjoined to it. And they like to claim that that is their, you know, cemetery and so forth, which is just clearly a dispute, because I'm like, well, my stepfather is buried in this cemetery. This is why this location was strategically located. And this is why we're here to gather up the grave dirt and keep on trucking, if you will. And the next thing I know, the Cleburne County Sheriff paid a visit the next day and basically announced to me, if you go back to Walnut Grove Cemetery, you will be arrested. But here's the thing. Why doesn't the Cleburne County Sheriff Department go to the Baptist church that's adjoined to the cemetery and say, if you insist on practicing Christianity here at the Baptist church on Sunday morning, you will be arrested, because it is the exact same orders. So if you're being asked by your local authorities to abandon your religious civil rights, then it becomes a civil rights issue. Lyron says, "I'm going to sleep. Vlad Dracula, goodbye." Oh, maybe I'll have to get your address sometime, depending on, what your blood type is and so on and so forth. Everybody, stay safe out there, especially if we make it through to Halloween. Have a happy and safe Halloween if you don't hear from me before. If today's your birthday, or whatever day your birthday is, happy birthday to you. And I think I've got through all of the major holidays. Probably the next major holiday will be the Independence Day for the United States of America. Unfortunately, we've already celebrated our Independence Day for the Confederate States of America on 22 February 2018. Everybody have a happy and safe day, especially all of you that are going to be freshmen this year in whatever high schools throughout the country. I expect that Pangburn High School in Pangburn, Arkansas will be #1 rated high school of 2019, because that is my goal. That's my objective, to make sure that you understand the importance of science and technology, especially your computer skills, and what it takes to develop that science and technology to eventually go on to a bigger and broader career in either computer programming or some form of operation that may bring you to the top floor of Fort Meade, Maryland, because computer technicians and people skilled at computers are always going to be some of the highest, most well-respected jobs in the intelligence community. Want to give one more quick shout out to all of those working in Canadian intelligence, and thank you all up there in Canada for making me feel so welcome. And I will never forget when I crossed the border. It was like immediately realizing the difference between the U.S. Border Patrol and Customs and U.S. DOT, and what the distinction is between the United States and the Canadian side of things. It's the difference between daylight and dark. They're very professional, competent. I mean, maintain a very easygoing attitude in Canada. And it's like, wow, it's just like, of course I was in a different country. But coming from the U.S., it was just, it was just a stark contrast. And I realized this is probably why they don't have the terrible acts of violence and terrorism up here in Canada, and such a low crime rate than compared to their neighbors south, which are the United States. Because, I always thought to work for the United States Department of Transportation, you had to be a grade A asshole, with an attitude. It's like you're mad at the world. And I see your logbook and paperwork, and, you even try to, lighten up and say, I'm not hauling logs. And like it says on the sheet here, we're paperless electronic logs, and they go through it with a fine-tooth comb. And out there in California, one incident in particular where the US DOT was just determined that they were going to get me on something. They didn't like the electronic log, even though it had been a pilot program approved by Congress. They were determined to make me or force me to comply by doing a handwritten log. And I said, it's no go, because if I do that, it violates the federal law. And it would be the equivalent of running 2 logbooks. And we've already been through this briefing. And so after about 45 minutes of going back and forth, and I kept a very professional attitude, if I do say so myself, I won, because they finally found their target for the day. And by that time, I was like, okay, Mr. Warner, you can go. Thank you very much. And I'm on up the grapevine. Hope everybody has a winning day and everything's coming up roses for you. This is all for now from you know who, Dracula. Aloha.